From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, Science and the Paranormal. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you. I hope you got our flowers that we sent out. Here's what's happening. 9 survivors rescued from the rubble in Turkey more than a week after that massive earthquake struck, as the focus of the aid effort now shifted to helping people struggling without shelter or enough food in the bitter cold. This disaster, with a combined death toll in Turkey and neighboring Syria, has now exceeded 41,000 people. It has ravaged cities in both countries, leaving many survivors homeless in near-freezing winter temperatures. State officials identified 43-year-old Anthony McRae, who was charged with multiple gun-related crimes back in 2019, as the attacker who shot and killed 3 people and critically wounded 5 others at Michigan State University. McRae, who was found off campus after dying of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound, was identified less than 9 hours after police lifted a campus-wide shelter-in-place order following the mass shooting. The sensors from a suspected Chinese spy balloon shot down over the U.S. earlier this month have been recovered from the Atlantic Ocean. Search crews found significant debris from the site, including all of the priority sensor and electronic pieces identified. The FBI is examining the items, which the U.S. said were used to spy on sensitive military sites. The U.S. has since shot down 3 more objects since the first on the 4th of February. Dr. John Curtis, onlinecolumnist.com, with us here. John, these objects, they're baffling. What's going on?
Well, this is a continuation of the July 12th, 2016 ruling in the International Court of Arbitration by The Hague, in which China was reprimanded for interfering with international shipping and freedom of navigation in the South China Sea by building out military installations in small sandbars in the Spratlys. So this is another continuation of what you call the rejection of the rules-based order. So China is in the sea spying, and now they're in the air in what appears to be a network of balloons that have been sent not just, in North America, but also in South America. And then the Japanese today, defense minister, just revealed that Japan has been subject to these balloon spy crafts for the last 3 years. So it's not new, but what's new is the brazen manner. We're talking about a massive, spycraft, 2 buses long and wide, and over 2,000 pounds. And yes, they've recovered those sensors. They know 100%. They don't know they know 100% about the origin of the prior UFO that was shot down over Myrtle Beach. But what they don't know yet is the analysis of the debris from the 2 shoot-downs in Alaska and one in Canada recently.
Right, and they can't find the one over Lake Huron.
The PLA that's now under the gun again in a Republican-oriented Senate, going for the unvarnished truth about the origin of the coronavirus. The Chinese government right now is ballistic, and they are, using every rogue element of the People's Liberation Army in order to, spy on just about everyone.
So you believe it's Chinese, all of them?
I do.
Okay, thank you, John. John Curtis, onlinecolumnist.com. But don't forget the Tic Tac videos where our Navy pilots tried to chase these objects and they couldn't, of a couple of years ago. What were they? This is all very strange, I'll tell you. Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor and United Nations ambassador, announced her candidacy for president, becoming the first major challenger to former President Donald Trump for the 2024 Republican nomination. She worked in the Trump administration. Inflation turned higher to start 2023 as rising shelter, gas, and fuel prices took their toll on consumers, according to the Labor Department. Our expert on the economy, Catherine Austin Fitz, with us here. Well, Catherine, we're not out of the woods on this one yet.
Well, I would say the Labor Department statistics are remarkably low. I think inflation is higher than what they're showing. In fact, it may be as much as double in some places,
Jeez.
including the place, George, that you're in right now. So one, I would say these numbers are low, too. I think there's no doubt everybody, businesses and individuals, are struggling with inflation. Now, that inflation was caused by the Fed, and so now the Fed is raising interest rates, and supposedly that's bringing down the inflation they caused. So, which brings us back to the same question, why can't the Treasury print the currency? Why do we need a debt growth model to print currency? But that's a whole other topic. Yes, we're struggling with inflation. It's far from over.
Catherine, every expert I hear from is saying that we're going to have another housing bubble burst. You're an expert on the housing market. What do you think?
So, given the rise in interest rates, you would expect the housing market to really cool down. But it hasn't cooled down anywhere near as much as you might expect so far. And I think it's because, George, there is the central banks have printed a great deal of money, and that money is looking for real assets. And, so there's a counter trend, which is just cash looking for a place to go. When you bubble the economy as much as the central banks have bubbled, that they're looking for real places to go. So I think that, to me, it's logical the housing market continue to cool with both inflation and higher interest rates. But there's a cross trend here with cash looking for a real place to go. So I think it may not be as severe as we might normally expect.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. Catherine's website, solari.com, solari.com. Thanks, Catherine. Some 17% of people living in the United States, or more than 1 in 6, were 65 or older in 2020. This represents 55.7 million people, an increase of 15.2 million people. Up next, he's back, pharmacist Ben Fuchs from criticalhealthnews.com, joining us to give us some health tips. We'll take your call shortly with him as well. Here's the phone number to call for assistance, not to get on the show, but people taking notes to what Ben is saying. 1-855-949-RADIO, 1-855-949-7234. And don't forget to hit that website, criticalhealthnews.com. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. We've got a great program for you tonight. Pharmacist Ben Fuchs back with us. Registered pharmacist, nutritionist, cosmetic chemist, has been compounding custom medications and formulating nutritional and skincare products and consulting with doctors and patients since graduating from the University of Colorado in 1986. He is a member of the Critical Health News team, and, of course, again, that website is criticalhealthnews.com. Ben, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you, George. Happy Valentine's Day, and I did not get my coast-to-coast roses.
You did not?
No.
Something must be wrong with the shipping department. We only sent out 4 million.
Is that right?
You know,
I didn't get mine.
Do you believe that?
Everybody got a coast-to-coast flowers. Well, thank you for doing what you're doing, George, and thank you, and a happy Valentine's Day to you and yours.
Can you believe the next time you're back with me, it's going to be March already?
Yeah, you know what? The months are flying by, the years are flying by, life is flying by, and all that reminds me, and I'm seeing my friends and my family, my mom especially, getting older. It just reminds me that you want to take care of your body now. You don't want to wait. Time goes by so fast, and all of a sudden you're 70 and 80 and 90, and your body's falling apart, and you can't get it back. You want to take care of it while you're young and while you're healthy, while you're reasonably healthy.
Exactly.
Take care of your body.
My mother, who's going to be 94 in May,
how's she doing?
Took a little tumble a few weeks ago. And, you know, those falls, that's what gets those older folks.
It could be the end.
But she's okay.
She didn't break anything.
She bounced back. She said she bruised her leg a little bit, but she said she's fine, and she's back at it again.
But your mom was taking care of herself for many years.
Oh, my God. She was Miss Supplement.
Yeah, back in the 60s, 50s, and 60s.
She used to cut out articles about supplementation.
What are we talking, the 50s and 60s?
Yeah, and put them in my room and stuff like that.
Wow. How long have you been supplementing?
Probably since I was 15.
That's amazing.
And it's gotten better since I met you and Doc.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, you know your stuff, George.
Yeah, I learned it the hard way.
Yeah, high hyaluronic acid, George.
And everything else. I have many emails that have come in, Ben, that we'll talk about before we take calls at the half.
Okay.
One, of course, had to do with a person who said, my father has been on statins for years. Can I get him off? Now, I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor.
No, but I'm a pharmacist. I know all about statins, and I also know all about cholesterol. And I will tell you definitively, with no ifs, ands, or buts, there is no more important molecule in your body, no more multifunctional molecule in your body, no more anti-aging and healing and stress management, more powerful stress management molecule in your body than cholesterol. And to shut down its production with a drug is flat-out ignorant biochemistry. Not only that, but anybody these days, anybody who's hip to the cardiovascular system understands that it's not cholesterol that is really the problem. It's the weakness in the blood vessels that cholesterol is patching up that is the problem. And strengthening the blood vessels and the heart is really how you take care of cardiovascular disease. The real problem with heart disease, George, is sugar. That's the problem.
Really?
Yes, because cholesterol is a building molecule. And when we eat sugar, we trick the body into thinking it's supposed to be building. Sugar signals building. And then we're not building, we're not working out, we're not exercising, and so all that sugar gets stored as fat. But the biochemistry of the body is such that when it sees sugar, it thinks it's supposed to be building. So cholesterol goes up. If you want to lower your cholesterol, you take sugar-metabolizing nutrients like niacin, the ultimate niacin for longevity, like the sweeties, chromium and vanadium, and you keep your intake of sugar down. In fact, if you want to do one thing to improve your longevity, if you want to do one thing to improve your quality of life and reduce your risks of chronic degenerative disease, or to reverse chronic degenerative disease, it's to lay off the sugar. And I'm not just talking about pies and cakes and desserts and soda pop
and candy bars.
As problematic as those are, but even things like breads and pancakes and refined carbohydrate cereals, refined carbohydrates of all kinds break down into sugar. So weaning yourself off of sugar is job number one if you're interested in reversing chronic degenerative disease or preventing it and increasing longevity and using nutrients that support sugar metabolism. In fact, it's been shown that niacin, which is a sugar metabolizing nutrient, you find in the ultimate niacin from longevity, is equipotent, same potency for lowering cholesterol as a statin drug with no toxicity, with beneficial effects, no side effects and toxicity, but beneficial effects for your skin, for your digestive system, for your brain, for dementia. And on top of all that, you don't need to get a prescription for it. You can just get it right off the longevity website or call Critical Health News. Ultimate niacin, just as potent as a statin drug, and instead of the toxicity, you get multiple health benefits.
What do you do, though, if this listener's father goes to his doctor and the doctor says you are not getting off the statins?
Well, I have a lot of friends who are doctors, and doctors are well-meaning folks. And when the doctor says something, he's been studying the body for a while, so he understands certain things. However, the doctor, you don't work for the doctor. The doctor works for you. And so if you want to get off a drug, and I always tell people, if you're on a drug chronically for the rest of your life, as they say, your number one health challenge is to figure out how to wean yourself off that drug, and you do it with your doctor. Say, look, doc, statin drugs are going to knock out my cholesterol. Cholesterol is important for my brain. It's important for my muscles. It's important for my testosterone and all my DHEA and all my building hormones and stress management hormones for making cells. I don't think it's a good idea to put me on a statin drug that's going to just willy-nilly knock out the production of this major this massively important molecule. How about if we wean me off of the statin drugs and I'll go on a low-sugar diet, I'll treat myself like I'm a diabetic, and all diabetics know that their cholesterol is high, diabetes and elevated cholesterol go hand in hand. I'll treat myself like I'm a diabetic. I'll wean myself off the sugar. I'll use the ultimate niacin from longevity and the sweeties and all the natural blood sugar stabilizing nutrients and wean me off of the statin drug. And it's the patient's right to do that. Yes, the doctor understands things about the body and biochemistry. And by the way, I like doctors. I have a lot of friends who are physicians, and they're really
You like them more than Doc does.
Well, Doc has the personal experiences with them that I haven't had. I have a lot of friends who are physicians. They're well-meaning, beautiful people. They want to make a difference, a fundamental difference in people's lives, which is what health is. It's a fundamental aspect of our lives. But they're also people, and they're bought into the same memes, the same belief systems, and even more sometimes because they get propagandized in medical school, like I got propagandized in pharmacy school. So they believe things, and sometimes they're busy, and sometimes it's easier to listen to the salesperson than it is to do the research.
Well, what if you're on statins, you get a blood test, and the test comes back and it shows all your cholesterol levels normal?
And you're on a statin drug?
And you're on a statin drug.
Wean yourself off a statin drug and see what happens. And by the way, at the same time, you want to make sure that you're exercising, that you're going on a low-sugar diet, maybe ketogenic or some kind of low-carbohydrate diet. You want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Look, George, the body is designed to heal itself. We have to get this through our collective heads. The body is designed to heal itself from the genetic level upwards. We are the descendants of ancestors who survived by healing bones that broke, by healing tissue that was torn, by supporting blood vessels and supporting the heart under all kinds of stressful conditions. We're the descendants of those ancestors who made it through starvation and through mechanical traumas. So our bodies know how to heal. We don't need to be pharmacalized to be healthy. And make no mistake about it, pharmaceuticals, while they're necessary sometimes, are poisons. And what doesn't show up as a side effect is the fact that your body is mobilizing precious resources to detoxify that statin drug. So sure, there's side effects from a statin drug because you're suppressing cholesterol production, suppressing coenzyme Q10 production, but what doesn't show up as a side effect is deficiencies in the nutrients that are required to purify and detoxify that poison. You understand what I'm saying? It's not a side effect. It's a depletion of precious resources that are going to cost you health and longevity. So drugs of all kinds, while they're occasionally necessary, should be regarded as necessary evils, and they should be considered to be a poison that the body that we want to cleanse our body of as best as possible. So stay on your statin drug as long as you need it, and then wean yourself off of it by changing your lifestyle. And understand that the body has healing built into it from the DNA upwards.
What if you were put on the statin because you had cardiovascular disease?
Well, you have cardiovascular disease. Why do you have it? There's no cardiovascular disease angel that sprinkles cardiovascular disease dust on your head. It's a metabolic issue that's caused by lifestyle problems.
Sure.
For the most part. There are some genetic familial hypercholesterol states that people can have, but for most of us, elevated cholesterol represents a dysfunctional lifestyle and diet. Change your lifestyle, change the way you eat, and you'll find that the body will love you. The body will repair itself and recover from whatever your metabolic issues are, and you'll be able to live your God-given 120-year longevity lifespan that we're all supposed to have.
Pharmacist Ben Fuchs with us from criticalhealthnews.com. Again, the number to call for assistance. They're taking notes as Ben talks, 1-855-949-7234. And the website to go to set the world record again, criticalhealthnews.com. We're going to take calls at the half, by the way, in all of next hour with pharmacist Ben Fuchs. I want to thank you again, though, Ben, you and Doc, for the service you provide for us. You've been sponsors of the program for years, but more importantly, you give great information to people.
We do, and we do it all week long, all month long. Even when we're not on the show, we're giving out advice. We're helping people understand how to use nutritional supplements and helping people with their health challenges. We suffer in this country, George, from low PQ. We have IQ, that's your intelligence quotient. Now there's EQ, I'm sure you've heard of emotional intelligence. There's something called PQ. I made that up, but it's real. PQ is physical intelligence. We suffer in this country from low PQ. We don't understand how our bodies work. We don't understand what our pancreas does. We don't understand what our gallbladder does. The doctor says, we got to take that gallbladder out. We say, I don't know what it does anyway. You might as well take it out. Because we don't understand the basics of how our body is put together, we are leaving health on the table. We suffer. We have shortened longevity. We end up losing our organs and being put on poisons because we don't understand how the body works. So both Doc and I are dedicated to helping raise PQ, helping people understand their bodies. And that's why I'm always, when I come on the show, and even when I do my own show, when I do my presentations, I always tell people how the body is working to produce the disease state. I don't want to just say, take this pill or take that pill. I want everybody to understand the mechanisms of their disease state and the mechanisms of recovery and the mechanisms of the nutritional supplements that they can take to support that recovery.
Ben, we're going to come back and start calls with you next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with pharmacist Ben Fuchs from criticalhealthnews.com. That's the website to go to. They've also got free apps now in the App Store, criticalhealthnews.com. Download it to your phone, and you can have some fun getting information on that. And the toll-free number to call for assistance anytime, after the show, during the show, tomorrow, 1-855-949-7234. Ben, what, for you personally, what is one of the greatest moments that you've had on this program with people who have contacted you after the fact?
On the Coast to Coast program?
Yeah.
I've had so many. The one that stands out the most probably is the kid with the colon cancer. I think I've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the early shows that we did, probably 7 years ago. The kid had heard me on the radio, heard me on Coast to Coast, and he contacted me, and he had been diagnosed with colon cancer, which is absolutely horrific, as you can imagine. And put him on a program, and within 6 months, he was clear. And that was the most dramatic thing in all my practice, in all the years I've been practicing. That was the most dramatic recovery that anybody ever made. Cancer is a really tough one because once the body goes into the mode of carcinogenesis, once the cells start to go crazy, it's really difficult to turn them off. It can be done, and I have a textbook called Spontaneous Remissions. It's a bunch of case studies on remissions, cancer remissions that have just occurred, and they call them spontaneous because they can't figure out how it happened. But they do, and we know that cancer happens all the time in people, and the body takes care of it. So there are mechanisms in place for taking carcinogenesis and cancer and reverting it back, cells that are that are cancer, and reverting them back to normal cells. But it doesn't happen that often, and that was probably the most thrilling thing that ever happened to me in my healthcare career.
All right, well, let's go to the phones here, Ben, and we'll do it next hour as well. People are lining up to talk to you.
All right.
First-time caller Daniel's with us in Bakersfield, California. Daniel, go ahead, sir.
Hey, Daniel.
Hey, how's it going? Hey, George, just want to tell you, first-time caller, long-time listener. Love what you do.
Thank you, sir.
My question is mainly just about metabolism. I used to be in the military. I used to be in, peak physical shape, and I would put my body through rigorous physical activities on a regular basis. My main concern is when I used to work out, I used to take a lot of pre-workouts, and at that time when pre-workouts started coming out, there were a lot of unregulated stuff within them. And let's fast forward 15 years later, and I'm overweight. I live a hereditary lifestyle. I kind of have an physical active work life, but I'm trying to recharge my metabolism. And I don't know if I shot it by doing all of those pre-workouts, and I just totally holistically want to just recharge my body, get back into shape. But I don't know if I've done something biologically to mess it up. And I just want your opinion.
The body is massively resilient. You haven't done anything permanent. What you want to do is you want to sensitize your insulin. Make your insulin more powerful. Over time, our insulin becomes less sensitive to sugar. Your body has to secrete more insulin in order to make up for the decreased sensitivity. You end up with high levels of insulin and low levels of glucose control, blood sugar control. This is what we were talking about earlier. Taking care of your body's ability to handle sugar is, next to working with digestive health, the first thing you always want to do is work with digestive health. But the second most important thing is taking care of your body's ability to handle sugar, resensitizing your body's sugar metabolizing hormone system, which is, of course, largely based on insulin. You do that, number one, by going as low sugar as you can. When I say sugar, as I said earlier, I'm talking cereals and breads and pasta and potatoes and rice, anything that breaks down into sugar. You want to be doing protein and veggies and fats. Protein also, by the way, gets turned into sugar, so you got to be a little bit careful with doing too much protein. But basically laying off the refined sugars and then using nutrients that supports your body's ability to handle sugar. We talked about chromium, vanadium. Youngevity's got a great product called Sweeties. We talked about niacin. And by the way, There's some folks that will tell you that niacin will temporarily raise your blood sugar, and there's some.
And it'll give you a flush.
And it'll give you a flush. If you want to reduce the flush, make sure you're using essential fatty acids. The ultimate EFAs will reduce the niacin flush, and the niacin flush goes away over time, just like the temporary elevation in blood sugar that sometimes occurs when you start taking niacin will also go away. But what niacin does, vitamin B3, is it's part of something called the glucose tolerance factor, the GTF. And this GTF is a group of molecules that helps the body handle sugar and sensitizes or potentizes insulin. So using chromium, vanadium, and niacin, all the B vitamins. In fact, very interestingly, this is a really cool story. There was the very first vitamin that was ever discovered was called vitamin B1, thiamine. And it was discovered when it was noticed that people who ate polished rice that had the coating removed, people liked white rice, they still like white rice, were deficient in this, or were getting this nerve disease. And this nerve disease is very similar to diabetes, to peripheral neuropathy that occurs with diabetes. And they discovered that when people ate vitamin B1 or they ate the polishings from rice, that these neuropathies, these peripheral neuropathies, these nerve pains started to be reduced. And it turns out that thiamine is not only important for this peripheral neuropathy, and I know a lot of folks are dealing with peripheral neuropathy, which is a classic sign of diabetes. It turns out that thiamine, in addition to helping folks deal with these nerve diseases, is also important as a blood sugar stabilizing nutrient. So using thiamine, vitamin B1, in addition to vitamin B3, as well as chromium, vanadium, magnesium, George, I know you love magnesium.
Oh, yeah.
Also important for the blood sugar system. Zinc is very important for blood sugar. Vitamin A is very important for blood sugar. So to cut to the chase here, you did not do permanent damage to your metabolism. Make sure you're working out, and exercise, by the way, helps lower blood sugar, and then also using the nutritional supplements that we just talked about, and then also going as low sugar in your diet as possible, and you'll find that your metabolism should recover nicely.
All right, thank you, Daniel. What do you think of metformin for glucose control?
George, it's like the statins. The statins and metformin are not like the worst drugs you could take. There are definitely worse drugs than those. But why would you take a drug that your body now has to process as a poison? It has to use its precious resources, its zinc and its magnesium and its copper and its vitamin C to detoxify the metformin when you could just wean yourself off the foods and change the way you eat. We have to begin to understand the relationship between the foods we eat and how our body shows up from a health or lack of health perspective. Our collective health as a culture started to decline around the turn of the 20th century when we figured out how to process foods, when we figured out how to extrude foods, when we started to eat these processed foods. Now they have ultra-processed foods that have been shown not only to mess up metabolism and to throw off blood sugar, but they're even associated with cancer and dementia as well, brain diseases. So we have to learn to control our foods and to nutritionally supplement. Will metformin work? Probably it'll lower your blood sugar, but at what cost? In my opinion, it's not worth it.
Next up, Ruth is with us in Oahu, in Hawaii, west of the Rockies. Hi, Ruth.
Hi.
Good.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
What can be done for squamous cell carcinoma and varicose veins?
Okay, there's two important questions. Squamous cell carcinoma is a form of cancer, skin cancer. And unfortunately, skin cancer rates are increasing. But the most important thing about skin cancer is the word cancer. It's not the skin. Cancer shows up in various parts of the body, and the important part is not where it's showing up, it's that it's showing up. And cancer shows up when the body is under duress. What is cancer really? Cancer, first of all, there's no such thing as cancer per se. There is skin cancer and prostate cancer and all these different organs that are related to the cancer. But cancer is a cellular phenomena. It's a cell that is going crazy. Look, for a cell to become a liver or a cell to become a heart or a cell to turn into an organ requires of that cell to give up its independence. So basically, you take the liver. It's made up of liver cells. The liver cells are called hepatocytes. Or we'll take the skin cells. They're called keratinocytes. So you have these skin cells. They're giving up their independence so they can become the skin. They're giving up their independence so they can become the organ. But in return, they expect to be loved. They expect to be nurtured with nutrition, they expect to have oxygen, and they expect to have a clean place to do their work. Under conditions of starvation or malnourishment, under conditions of low oxygen, and under conditions of toxicity, a cell will say, you know what, I'm not going to be a skin. I'm not going to be a liver. I'm not going to be a bone. I'm just going to divide on my own. I'm just going to become like a bacteria. I'm just going to divide. I'm not going to give up my independence when you're not taking care of me. So cancer represents an adaptive response of a cell. A cell doesn't know what else to do, so it just starts dividing. It doesn't give up of itself to become a liver or a skin or an organ because it's not being taken care of. So cancer is the price we pay for not taking care of ourselves. So what do you do for squamous cell carcinoma? You load the body up with antioxidants, number one. Vitamin C is phenomenal for the skin as well as for skin cells and for helping stabilize cancerous cells. And there's a lot of literature on vitamin C being protective against and even helping reverse cancers. Vitamin E is another very important nutrient for the skin and also for cancer. There's a wonderful molecule that is the body's natural cancer fighter. It's called glutathione, and you may have heard of this, George. Glutathione is made in the liver, and it's the body's most important cancer fighter. By the way, Longevity has a new product called Repair Plus, which is a glutathione product.
I didn't know that.
It just came out. It's a glutamine product, but glutamine is a raw material for making glutathione. Selenium is also important for this glutathione molecule. Sulfur is important for this glutathione molecule. These are all strategies you can use for all cancers, nutritional strategies. And then the second thing, varicose veins, that's a sign that the blood is not circulating as it should. The venous system, the blood is a circulatory system is a circle. So the blood goes from your heart and it goes into a big circle and comes back to your heart. On the return trip, the blood is not being pushed as well, and it depends on our muscular movement in order to push the blood upwards. Over the course of a sedentary lifestyle, we don't get that blood pushing upwards as well, and the blood starts to pool. And that's what causes varicose veins. It also causes hemorrhoids. So there's a couple things you could do, and the technical term for this is venous insufficiency. In other words, the venous system is not moving the blood as well as it should. So number one, exercise is the most important thing you can do for hemorrhoids as well as for varicose veins, and also edema in the feet or in the ankles, swelling in the lower parts of the body. So moving the body, moving through exercise is very important. Oxygenation is very important. Do you know when you breathe, George, your diaphragm goes up and down? It acts like a part of your heart. It acts to pump the blood. Just breathing deeply will push the diaphragm up and down, and that can support the blood movement as it returns to the heart through the venous system. And then there's things that you could do to support the vasculature itself. Vasculature is made up of connective tissue, and using things like whey protein, for example, to build the connective tissue, or vitamin C to build the connective tissue. Get yourself on an Mighty 90 essential nutrient supplement program like the Healthy Start Pack, and then use the antioxidant nutrients for taking care of the cancer. And make sure you're breathing correctly. If there's any toxins that are getting into your system, you want to make sure that you're taking care of those by eliminating the entrance of food toxins, most especially.
All right, we have text and tweets. Tom, what do you have for Ben?
Hey, Ben, Greg in Westlaco, Texas. He'd like you to discuss sciatica and the best way to treat it.
Yeah, sciatica. I can't think of. There's not a lot more miserable conditions than sciatica. The absolute awful pain that goes down your lower back, through your hips, and through your butt, and down through your legs. A couple things you want to do. Number one, you want to do physical things like body work. I love rolfing. Rolfing is an amazing body work that's a little bit painful when they're doing it, but it feels great when it's done. Even just a good massage can help with sciatica. And then there's anti-inflammatory nutrients. Magnesium is one of the all-time great anti-inflammatory nutrients. The Osteomag from Longevity is great. Longevity's got a great product called the CM cream and the CM capsules. That can help with the inflammation that causes sciatica. And then interestingly, when you fast, this is for all chronic pain conditions, by the way, when you don't eat or you intermittently fast or you reduce your calories, the inflammation that's associated with foods, and make no mistake about it, when we eat foods, especially fatty foods and the wrong kinds of fatty foods, we go into something called postprandial inflammation. Prandial means eating. That means post-eating inflammation. So reducing your intake of foods can be very helpful.
That's important. Ben, we're going to take a short break. We'll come back and chat more and take calls next on Coast to Coast. Pharmacist Ben Fuchs with us. We're going to take calls with Ben this hour. And again, criticalhealthnews.com. That's the website to go to. It's doing real well. And the toll-free number to call for assistance, 1-855-949-RADIO, 1-855-949-7234. And welcome back, Ben Fuchs with us. Ben, the clock got us, and I think you were ready to talk about Ruth's call from Hawaii about varicose veins.
Yeah, the varicose veins. You want to improve there's two strategies. Number one, you want to improve the movement of blood on the return trip from the heart. The blood goes in a circle from the heart and then goes back around. And on that return trip, it depends on our muscular movement in order to push that venous blood back to the heart. So sedentary lifestyle is a major risk factor for varicose veins, and moving the body, and also exercise and that kind of thing, just any kind of movement. Also breathing can help, too, as we talked about earlier, because of the movement of the diaphragm, helping propel the blood upwards. Then building the connective tissue in the venous in the venous system, in the veins, is also important, and there's lots of ways to do that. One of the most important things is to build a collagen. Collagen is the major protein in connective tissue. Collagen peptides are a great product if you want to build collagen, not just for the circulatory system, but for the bones and for the skin as well. And then also vitamin C is the critical vitamin for building the connective tissue, for building the collagen, and you'll get vitamin C in the Beyond Tangy Tangerine and a bunch of products, longevity products. Getting on a good Mighty 90 essential nutrient, well-rounded nutritional supplement program like the Healthy Start Pack would be perfect.
Okay, thanks. Let's go back to the phones. Thomas in La Jolla, California. Hey, Tom, how you been?
Really good. How are you doing, George?
Good.
And pharmacist Ben,
yes.
Thank you for the information that you bring to the table.
You bet.
I'm on longevity. Thank you for longevity.
Thank you.
My comment, and then a question.
Yes, sir.
The military issues iodine tablets to the military, and for radiation events such as reactor meltdowns, and of course now the whole world is talking about limited nuclear exchange, heaven forbid.
Heaven forbid.
But to protect, just my opinion, it's just my opinion, I use Ocean's Gold of longevity because I think it's a natural iodine with cofactors.
Yes.
And I think it would be the best to protect the thyroid gland during a radiation event. And so I was wondering, this brings me to my question, if you would connect the dots for me and the audience of the importance of iodine, natural iodine,
it's unbelievable,
to the thyroid gland, and perhaps put it in the context of a radiation event, such as war or reactor meltdown, like Fukushima or Diablo Canyon,
Chernobyl,
or 3 Mile Island. And thank you again for the work that you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I can't believe we have to talk about radiation, but yeah, you do. Iodine can protect the thyroid, definitely.
Don't you get that in salt, table salt?
Well, you get some, but you need a lot more than that.
All right.
But you do. They put enough iodine in table salt to keep you from getting what's called goiter. Goiter is when the thyroid will enlarge in order to grab iodine. Under iodine deficiency states, the thyroid really needs iodine, so it will enlarge in order to grab whatever iodine.
Look like a turkey, right?
What's that?
You look like a turkey.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. You don't see it anymore because of iodized salt. But iodine is also important for the prostate. It's important for all the glands, the adrenal glands, the prostate gland. It's a glandular supplement, a glandular nutrient. It's a mineral, and it's not found on Earth. It's found in the ocean. So iodine, the main source of iodine is seafood. And for folks who don't eat seafood or don't live near water, those are the folks who are most susceptible to getting goiter and iodine deficiencies. It is unspeakably important. Iodine deficiencies cause all kinds of problems around the world with something called cretinism in children, mental retardation, and that kind of thing. Iodine is very, very important. Now, the thyroid iodine isn't going to help the thyroid necessarily, but iodine is important for thyroid hormone. So that iodine, you can't make thyroid hormone. The gland itself is is not going to be affected by iodine, but the hormone is made from requires iodine for its activity. Selenium is also very important, by the way. I know Doc loves selenium. He's always talking about that one. Selenium is also important for the thyroid. So if you're going to take iodine for your thyroid, you definitely want to get on the Ultimate Selenium, which is important for a lot of things, not just the thyroid. It's important for the hormone system, and it's important for the heart as well. So I would be working with selenium, and also vitamin A is important for the thyroid too. But iodine is one of those nutrients that we don't, in my humble opinion, we don't appreciate enough, because the little scant amount you get in iodized salt keeps you from getting goiter. But like with the recommended daily allowance, the RDAs, they keep you from being diseased, but we end up leaving health on the table. We may not get scurvy, we may not get beriberi, we may not get frank deficiency diseases like goiter or symptoms like goiter, but we leave health on the table. So you need more than you're going to get in iodized salt. That's the bare minimum.
Lisa is in Idaho. Welcome to the program. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, George, and thank you, Ben. I'm very grateful for this phone call. I have a relative that was diagnosed with endometrial cancer in 2021. So she was given a chemotherapy, and she is also diabetic. And so she did get the peripheral neuropathy in her feet, and I heard you talk about it earlier. Can it go away with the different supplements?
Oh, yeah. For peripheral neuropathy, you want to consider that, as I was saying earlier, to be a blood sugar problem, although there's other things that can cause it, but that's the first thing you want to think of. And as I was saying earlier, vitamin B1 is actually used to treat beriberi. One of the main symptoms of beriberi is peripheral neuropathy. So vitamin B1, the whole B complex really is important for the nervous system, all the Bs. You don't want to just target one B, whether it's thiamine or niacin or B12. You want to take the entire B complex, and that's one of the reasons why Beyond Tangy Tangerine is such a fabulous nutritional supplement, is because it's loaded with the B complex in liquid form. You always want your Bs, if you can, in liquid form, because they're water soluble, and they dissolve in water, and you can drink them. They go right through your intestine into your blood. So the Beyond Tangy Tangerine is an awesome thing for the peripheral neuropathy. But the endometrial cancer, that one's really interesting. That's the most common. I'm pretty sure that's the most common reproductive cancer. It's certainly one of the most common. I think it might be the most common reproductive cancer. The endometrial lining is in constant movement, and that's why it's so susceptible to cancer, because it's always moving anyway. It's very dynamic tissue. Any kind of female reproductive issue should be considered a cry for essential fatty acids. All reproductive issues. And there's another endometrial issue, by the way, called endometriosis, which is also really, really miserable health challenge. Right. So you want to make sure that you're using your essential fatty acids. Essential fatty acids help balance out estrogen, and they're very powerfully anti-inflammatory. Essential fatty acids, by the way, the Ultimate EFAs from Youngevity and the Ultimate EFA Plus, are like natural aspirin. They work in the same fashion as aspirin without any of the toxicity. So for folks who are taking aspirin on a regular basis, you might want to consider that to be a sign that you need your Ultimate EFAs. And for endometrial issues, that's one of the main things I would consider.
And aspirin came from the willow bark tree?
Initially it did. These days it's synthesized. That was the main source. In fact, aspirin was, you probably know this, George, is the first drug. It represented the birth of the pharmaceutical industry, was aspirin. You know what the second drug, Bayer's second drug, was? I'll bet you don't know this.
What was that?
Bayer's second drug was a cough syrup that was so powerful and so effective that they thought it was heroic, and they named it heroin. Is that interesting?
Really?
That was Bayer's second drug.
Jeez. Text and tweets. Tom, what do you have for Ben this half hour?
Sorry, he just made me laugh. Hey, Ben, Gretchen in Cincinnati would like you to explain what bursitis is and the ways to treat it.
Yes, absolutely. Anytime you hear itis, anytime you hear at the end of a word.
That's not good whenever you hear itis.
Itis means inflammation. And bursitis arthritis is inflammation of the joints. Tendinitis is inflammation of the tendons. Bursitis is inflammation of what are called the bursa, the bursae. The bursae are small little sacs that cushion the bones and the tendons. They're little bags of fluid that act as cushions for areas near the joints where the joints move. And through accelerated aging and as we get older and the impact of nutritional deficiencies and toxicities kick in, the bursa can become inflamed. As the joints can become inflamed, or the tendons can become inflamed, or any other part of the body can become inflamed, and it can be very, very painful. nature's anti-inflammatories are the essential fatty acids. Any kind of inflammation, and inflammation is behind pretty much all chronic degenerative diseases, should be considered a cry for ultimate EFAs and ultimate EFA plus. Now, there's also foods that will exacerbate inflammation, and folks who have arthritis or bursitis should pay attention to when their itises, whether it's bursitis or tendinitis or plantar fasciitis, whatever their itis is, they should pay attention to the relationship between specific foods and flare-ups in their pain. And they will find that certain foods are associated with flare-ups, especially processed fats and processed oils. You know, Doc's always talking about staying away from heated oils, and that's one of the main reasons, is heated oils exacerbate inflammation. So you want to see if you can notice a link between specific foods that you're eating and inflamed bursa or inflamed tendons or whatever your particular itis is, and then make sure you're using the ultimate EFAs. And by the way, there's another interesting supplement or dietary supplement, it's not a nutrient, that is similar to the ultimate EFAs and has anti-inflammatory properties and works like aspirin, and that is the cannabinoids, the endocannabinoids.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And for centuries, people have smoked pot or ingested hemp in order to take advantage of the anti-inflammatory benefits, and they didn't realize that the anti-inflammatory benefits that they get from marijuana or THC or CBD or any of these cannabinoid kinds of substances are really aspirin-like effects. So those can also help, too. Like Ingevi's got a whole line of hemp products with CBD.
Back to the calls. Mike in Wyoming. Take it away, Michael.
Hey, Mike.
Good morning. For my entire adult life, I've had a gastrointestinal system that's like the waves in the ocean, and I'm going to be 60 this year, and for about the past 9 months, it seems like it's really gotten like worse, and I am convinced I have exocrine pancreatic insufficiency.
Yeah.
I've got every symptom in the book.
It could very well be. The pancreas is the Mr. Cellophane. You know, remember that movie or that play Chicago or the movie Chicago? There was a song in there, Mr. Cellophane, because everybody looked through him. They didn't notice him, so they called him Mr. Cellophane. The pancreas is the Mr. Cellophane of the body, except when something goes wrong with the pancreas, you will notice it. And God forbid anybody should have pancreatic cancer. That's the most deadly form of cancer because the pancreas is an enzyme
Patrick
factory.
Swayze had that.
That's what Patrick Swayze had, and I think also Michael Landon maybe had that too. And it is a deadly one. Steve Jobs, of course, died of pancreatic cancer. It's a deadly cancer because the pancreas is an enzyme factory. It makes enzymes for the body, especially digestive enzymes. And when you have a pancreatic problem, it is absolute misery. So if you do have this condition of pancreatic insufficiency where you're not making pancreatic enzymes, that's a reason to take pancreatic enzymes. And pancreatic enzymes, you'll find them in the Ultimate Enzymes from Longevity, and they're pretty readily available. You definitely want to consider using pancreatic enzymes with your meals, maybe an hour after your meals. That's when the pancreas really kicks in to do its work. And then also, in addition, there's plain old baking soda. Sodium bicarbonate is very important for pancreatic health, and the pancreas does make sodium bicarbonate, and under conditions of pancreatic insufficiency, you may not be making sodium bicarbonate, and bicarbonate has a very, very important role in neutralizing acid and also in supporting digestive health. So using a little tiny bit of sodium bicarbonate an hour, maybe 2 hours after your meals, by a little bit I mean a quarter teaspoon or so in a glass of water, that can have a dramatic effect, dramatic benefit for folks who are dealing with any kind of pancreatic health issue.
Mike, any follow-up question, Michael?
Well, because I've got every symptom in the book. I've got the oily stool. I've got the bloating gas, and
you want to take that very, very, very seriously.
Yeah.
You don't want anything going wrong with your pancreas. And see if you can notice a relationship between the foods you eat and pancreatic issues, and maybe start laying off those foods. And then because of the relationship between the pancreas and the intestine, you probably want to start doing some intestinal support strategies. Of course, probiotics are important for the intestine, and that Repair Plus that we talked about earlier and the Daily Digest from Longevity are two really nice intestinal support supplements.
What doctor would handle something like that? Specialist?
Probably an endocrinologist for the pancreas or a GI guy.
Okay. Joe in Boston. Take it away, Joseph.
Yes, hi, Ben. I'm visually impaired, and I don't have the money. I have several things. I wonder if you could help me off the air. I have reflex and a few other things. Is there a way to contact you off there?
Why don't you send an email to health@criticalhealthnews.com and tell them that you want to talk to me, and they'll get you my email, and you can just send me a personal email.
About a couple of years ago, Ben, you helped him out before, so if you want to do it again, there you go, which is always good.
Sorry, say that again, George?
If you want to do it again, go ahead.
Yeah, if you can send an email to health@criticalhealthnews.com and put your contact information there and tell me you want to speak to me, I'll reach out to you, and we can. I'm happy to help you out. Ben
Fuchs with us from criticalhealthnews.com again, and that's the website to go to. Everyone who's got a computer or a smartphone, hit that website right now. I want to see what the numbers are. Just go to criticalhealthnews.com. Have some fun with it. Spend a little time there, and then that toll-free number is 1-855-949-7234. Let's take another call before the break. Joe, Long Island, New York. Hey, Joseph, go ahead.
Hi, Ben. Happy Valentine's Day and happy St. Pat's coming up.
Thank you.
I have two supplements I want to bring up. One is fenugreek seed. There's information that says it helps reduce triglycerides, increase testosterone, which is actually important for women as they get older.
Yep.
So that would be my first supplement. And also on curcumin, I looked at Google Scholar on neurotransmitters, and it said, and these articles are pretty technical on the Google Scholar, but it did mention that it can commence neurogenesis in the frontal cortex, which is amazing. And then it said a side effect that can cause leanness, so you shouldn't take it if you're skinny, maybe, but actually most people could use a little bit more leanness, I think.
Yeah, that's probably true. So a couple things. First of all, and by the way, I love your smart listeners, George. That's awesome.
They're geniuses.
Really, really, that's awesome. I'm very impressed. Fenugreek is one of my favorite herbs. And when you talk about supplements, I don't necessarily like the word supplements for herbs. Herbs are more like medicine than they are like supplements. But nonetheless, fenugreek is awesome, and it tastes delicious. It makes the best tea. If you get yourself a little tea ball, you can make fenugreek tea. It's great for women. Is Joe? Is that the gentleman's name?
Joe.
I didn't catch.
Joe.
Yeah, as Joe said, it's great for women's health. Fenugreek, great for blood sugar, great for the hormone system, and it tastes awesome. I do fenugreek tea probably 2 or 3 times a week. I make a nice cup of fenugreek tea. And then curcumin, I know, George, that's your favorite, turmeric.
Turmeric, love it.
Turmeric, you gotta love that turmeric. Yeah, curcumin, it's probably the most powerful and the most medicinal of all of the herbs. I mean, you can make a case for a lot of different herbs for being the most powerful medicinal. And phytonutrients, plant nutrients, are tremendous. It's really interesting, George. Plants make something called adaptogens. Adaptogens are molecules that help us deal with life, that help us deal with the stresses of being in a body, the stresses of being alive. And plants contribute adaptogens. This is what plants do for us. They help us deal with life. They help us deal with the physical world. It's almost like there are little angels that grow off the earth. And so fenugreek and turmeric and aloe and chamomile and St. John's wort and all these wonderful herbs that people have been studying for millennia.
It's all great stuff, Ben. We're going to come back and wrap things up and take final calls next. Next hour, Simeon Hein joins us as we'll talk about science and the paranormal on Coast to Coast, so make sure you're part of the program. When we come back in a moment with Ben Fuchs from criticalhealthnews.com, we will take final calls as well. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with pharmacist Ben Fuchs from criticalhealthnews.com. And again, the toll-free number is 1-855-949-7234. Tom will take a text and tweet from you, too. Ben, you ready for final calls?
Yes, sir. Let's do it, George.
Let's do it. Let's go to Mike in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Welcome to the show. Hey, Mike, go ahead.
Mike.
Yeah, hi, George.
Hi.
Hi, Ben. I got a issue here. Not an issue. I'm pre-diabetic, but I don't take insulin.
Okay.
And my doctors have me check my blood sugar daily. Now, recently, I'm getting my blood sugar at a good level, at an acceptable level.
Okay.
But I'm still kind of overweight.
Okay.
Now, what's better?
Well, here's the deal.
Low blood sugar or losing weight?
Well, here's the deal. There's a hormone, which I'm sure you know, called insulin. Insulin helps your body handle sugar. Insulin takes care of your sugar, and when your insulin goes up, your sugar will go down. The problem is insulin is a weight gain hormone. So the more sugar you're eating, the higher your insulin is. It may look like your blood sugar is normal, but because your insulin is so high, because it's trying to take care of the sugar, that causes weight gain. Insulin is a weight gain hormone. It helps the body handle sugar as well as nutrients. So once your insulin becomes high, you go into a condition called, as you mentioned, prediabetes, or some people say insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome, and that can wreak havoc on your body independent of the blood sugar. So your blood sugar will be normal, and because nobody's testing the insulin, they have no idea that your insulin is high because it's trying to deal with all the sugar. And your sugar will be normal, but your insulin will be high. So what you got to do is you got to potentize your insulin, so it doesn't have to come out as you don't have to have the same abundance of insulin. Make your insulin more sensitive, and there's lots of ways to do that. We talked earlier about the glucose tolerance factor. That's chromium and vitamin B3, niacin. That will help potentize the insulin. So I'd be getting on the ultimate niacin. I'd be getting on the sweeties for sure. And then lowering the blood glucose, your blood sugar, without dealing with insulin. And you know what? There's a really handy-dandy trick for doing that, for lowering the blood sugar without insulin, and it's called water. Just plain old water will dilute your blood sugar so that your body can deal with the glucose without having to secrete so much insulin. So make sure you're drinking a lot of water, and dehydration is much more common than anybody knows. Dehydration, especially for folks who have diabetes, can be really significant because it concentrates the blood and it raises the blood sugar. In fact, you can test this yourself next time you test your blood sugar. I assume you do it in the morning. Notice how your blood sugar is high first thing in the morning, but after you drink water, your blood sugar drops. So another thing you could do to help potentize insulin and reduce your blood glucose without having to deal with insulin is to exercise, or even just to move. Just moving your body after you eat a lot of sugar. If you fall off the wagon, if you're on a low sugar diet, you start to eat a lot of sugar, or if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, exercise or movement can help drive glucose out of the blood and into the muscles. That's another thing you can do. And then third of all, make sure you're getting enough fiber is important. So chromium and vanadium, that's the sweeties, the ultimate niacin, of course all the mighty 90 essential nutrients I get on the healthy blood sugar pack, and then drinking more water, and then making sure that you're exercising and moving your body, and then also fiber.
Thank you, Mike. Good luck. Felicia's with us in Chicago. Welcome to the program. Hi, Felicia.
Hey, Felicia.
Hi, George. How are you?
Okay.
First of all, my husband, Lou, wanted me to let you know that he has been listening to your show for the last 20 years, and he is a huge, huge fan.
Well, thank Lou for us.
I will. So my question is for pharmacist Ben. I am 32 years old. For the last 8 years, I have suffered from really bad insomnia. So for the last 8 years, I've been prescribed generic Ambien, Zolpidem, every single night. So for the last 8 years, I've been taking it nightly. So since it affects the central nervous system, I'm wondering what my risk for dementia would be later on in life.
Well, I can't tell you exactly what your risks, but they're definitely elevated. In fact, any of these sleep aids, including Benadryl, a lot of folks take Benadryl to go to sleep, or Sleepies, not the Sleepies nutritional supplement. Longevity's got a great nutritional supplement called Sleepies. There's also the drug Sleepies. But the nutritional supplement Sleepies that Longevity has melatonin in it, and melatonin is something you definitely want to consider. Although at the age of 32, I wouldn't take it every day. I would take days off from melatonin. Melatonin is really important for anti-aging and also important for lowering stress hormone or balancing stress hormone, cortisol, in addition to helping you sleep. But at the age of 32, you want to make sure your body's making melatonin, so you don't want to take it every day. Also, something called GABA, which is in the Longevity Sleepies, has a really nice relaxing effect on the body. And as George probably knows, magnesium is also wonderful for helping you fall asleep. And a little bit of protein before you go to bed can keep you from waking up in the middle of the night. A lot of folks will wake up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep. And one of the reasons that happens is because their blood sugar drops in the middle of the night. And you can keep your blood sugar stable as you're sleeping by doing a little bit of the Fit Shake before you go to bed. A tiny little bit, maybe a teaspoon in water, will keep your blood sugar stable through the night and not keep you from waking up in the middle of the night.
Is GABA like a sleeping pill?
I wouldn't call it a sleeping pill, but it's definitely a relaxant. It's one of your brain's most important relaxing molecules. And GABA is a derivative of GABA is actually produced in the intestine when you eat enough fiber. And so making sure you get enough fiber is a great way to make your own natural precursor to GABA. It's called butyric acid. It's also part of the ketogenic diet, so that's another great way to build up butyric acid. Butyric acid is found in large concentrations in butter, and the word butter actually comes from the butyric acid, which is found in butter. GABA stands for gamma amino butyric acid, and butyric acid we used to use it in the gym. There used to be a substance called GHB. Have you ever heard of this stuff called GHB?
Yeah.
Gamma hydroxybutyrate, which is like butyric acid. And we used to use it in the gym for bodybuilding because butyric acid also helps you build muscle. And that's what's so cool about biochemistry and nutritional chemistry is once you start to understand these things, you can use your GABA not just for sleep, but also for relaxing and also for bodybuilding and for improving your mood.
That's great. Text and tweets, what do you have for Ben, Tom?
Hey, Ben, Lucas in Virginia would like to know if there's health benefits to investing in a hot tub.
Oh, man. That's something I talk about all the time. I always tell people if we cared about health in this country, we would have national hot tub insurance where everybody gets a hot tub in their backyard on the government because that's how important a hot tub is. What a hot tub is, hot water in a hot bath, not just a hot tub, but warm baths, let's say. It takes the body back to the last place it was safe. You know, all of our diseases, this is really interesting, George, all of our diseases chronic degenerative diseases come from as the end result of a body that is under stress, a body that's freaked out, a body that is in what we call sympathetic overdrive. In other words, the sympathetic nervous system is the body's stress nervous system. You've heard fight or flight nervous system. If we can figure out how to turn on the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system, that's called the parasympathetic nervous system. It's the rest and digest nervous system. And while the sympathetic nervous system makes your blood pressure go up, makes you constipated, suppresses your thyroid, and causes heart disease and inflammatory diseases, and suppresses the immune system, the parasympathetic nervous system lowers your blood pressure, improves your immune system, encourages good bowel movements and digestive health, supports the thyroid, supports creativity and fertility. All the good stuff is in the parasympathetic relaxation nervous system. Nothing will take you into the parasympathetic nervous system faster than immersing in a warm tub, hot tub or warm bath. And in fact, for folks who have high blood pressure, check this out. If you have high blood pressure and you're on a beta blocker or one of these antihypertensive drugs, and some of these calcium channel blockers and beta blockers are pretty toxic, and you want to wean yourself off, just take your blood pressure, measure your blood pressure, and then go sit in a warm bath. And then take your blood pressure when you get out of the warm bath. You will be blown away by how fast your blood pressure will drop. And that's an indicator of how much you're activating the parasympathetic rest and digest, anti-aging, healing, bone repairing, muscle building, fertility inducing nervous system. So yes, hot tubs are awesome. And you don't need a hot tub, just a warm bath is great.
First time caller Lowell is in Ohio. Welcome to the show, Lowell.
Hey, Lowell.
I just want to say thank you both for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lowell.
Last May, I'm a truck driver. I was on my way back from Erie, Pennsylvania, back to Columbus, Ohio, and I had a stroke.
Oh, my.
And I'm just asking what's the best thing I could do to recover from the stroke.
There's tons you could do.
I'm on a healthy body pack now.
Yes, stay on that, and there's a lot you could do. Make sure you're practicing slow, deep breathing techniques. Oxygenation is incredibly important for the brain, and the reason why a stroke is so damaging is because it robs the brain of oxygen. So making sure you're oxygenating. Get on YouTube and start studying breathing techniques, and it's extremely important. Secondly, reduce your sugar intake and lower your blood sugar. Strokes and diabetes and prediabetes and insulin resistance, they go hand in hand. So you got to make sure that you're on a low sugar diet, and then also get on all these sugar metabolizing nutrients.
I'm feeling keto. I've lost 70 pounds.
Good for you. That's awesome. And that 70 pounds probably had something to do with the stroke too. Good for you. That's awesome.
All eggs anyhow.
And then also you want to start building your connective tissue. The stroke is sometimes caused by defects in the connective tissue in the vascular system, in the blood vessel system. the circulatory system. So building the connective tissue is also important. And vitamin C, as it turns out, is not only important for the heart, it's also important for the connective tissue. So making sure you're doing high doses of vitamin C, the Beyond Tangy Tangerine will get you 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C per dose. So keep on that Beyond Tangy Tangerine. Make sure you're doing vitamin C. Water is also important for diluting the blood and improving blood supply to the brain. Make sure you're doing the breathing. Exercise would be great if you could do that too.
And Lowell, if you miss anything that Ben just told you, call this number because they're taking notes on what he is saying, and that is 1-855-949-7234. 1-855-949-RADIO. Take advantage of that. Next up, Eva's with us in Boise, Idaho. Hello, Eva. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Eva.
Hi, George. Hi, Ben. How are you?
Good. Hope you are too.
Good. Thank you. I have a question. I'm told that I'm going to be taking a pill. It's called a chemotherapy pill that you take every day, and it just doesn't sit right with me. I feel like there's something just not right about taking that pill, and I don't want to take it.
What is the pill they're giving you?
Pardon me?
What is the name of the pill?
I don't know. They're supposed to send it to me any day now.
What is the cancer they're treating?
Pardon?
Louder, Ben.
What's that?
Louder, please.
I say, what is the cancer they're treating?
Endometriosis cancer.
I'm sorry.
Endometriosis.
Endometrial cancer. Okay. Yeah, get yourself on the Ultimate EFAs as soon as possible. They're the anti-inflammatory nutrients, and they're specifically important for the female reproductive system, and they'll also support your estrogen. Chances are pretty good if you have endometrial cancer that you've got an estrogen problem. Estrogen is a very, very fascinating hormone. It's important, obviously, for the growth of things, especially growing a baby. But estrogen also has a dark side. And if it's not eliminated out of the body through the bowels and also detoxified in the liver, it can build up and it can cause all kinds of problems, including reproductive cancers and endometriosis and endometrial cancers and fibromyalgia and depression and hypothyroidism, a whole bunch of stuff. So improving estrogen detoxification at the level of the liver and then also through the bowels is extremely, extremely important. If you have any digestive health issues, you want to correct those. Get on the Nightly Essence from Youngevity. Get on the Daily Digest from Youngevity. Get on the Repair Plus from Youngevity. And then also work on the liver to support the liver's detoxification of estrogen. And by the way, I'm going to be doing a Zoom call on estrogen this Saturday at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. You can go to benandbeccazoom.com. We're going to talk about Youngevity, and we'll talk about estrogen and how you can eliminate it. But estrogen, taking care of your estrogen and balancing out is extremely, extremely important.
Minute and a half left, Ben. Let's take a final call. Rachel's with us in Los Angeles. Go ahead, Rach.
Hi, thanks for taking the call.
Sure.
I've heard you over the years, never thought I needed you to now. In taking care of my mother over the past year, I went from 125 to 100 pounds, sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night. In the process of apparently got a little bit of an autoimmune scenario. I've developed diarrhea. She's just passed last month, so developed diarrhea over the past year and a half to where it's now doctor. I just started going to a doctor. She recommended blue syntheside, and I've developed a little bit of cholesterol. I'm in perfect health, and all of a sudden, in the past 2 years, sleeping 2 hours a night, of course, has done havoc on my system.
Sure it has. Listen, we're only going to have about 40 seconds here, so that's not a lot of time. But if you send a note to Ben to health@criticalhealthnews.com and ask for Ben or pharmacist Ben, they'll hook you up with me, and I'll help you. I'll help you personally with that. Autoimmune diseases always should be regarded as a digestive health issue. The fact that you have diarrhea tells me there's something going on in the intestine. That's the first thing that you want to focus on. Get yourself on all the digestive support we talked about. I-26 from Youngevity is a great digestive health supplement for folks dealing with autoimmune disease. We're going to run out of time, so I hope you'll send an email to health@criticalhealthnews.com. Ask for Ben, and I'll help you out personally.
Ben, I want to thank you again for being part of the program, my friend, and I will talk to you in 6 weeks, okay?
I can't wait. All right, buddy. Happy Valentine's Day.
Ben Fuchs, criticalhealthnews.com. Up next, of course, we'll be talking with Simeon Hein about science and dark matter, monsters, cryptids, ball lightning, and the science of secret life forms. Just ahead on Coast to Coast AM, and don't forget our free YouTube channel. Just type in Coast to Coast AM. In a moment, Simeon Hein joins us as we talk about the paranormal and science on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Dr. Simeon Hein back with us, former university professor in statistics and research methods. He came across the idea of remote viewing in 1986, somewhat skeptical, but as a result of the training, surprisingly positive, and it convinced Dr. Hein that there is a large area of scientific knowledge that is being withheld from public discussion. Subsequently, he established the not-for-profit Institute for Resonance and began teaching remote viewing classes in Boulder, Colorado, and continues to teach online. He also became interested in topics of crop circles, unexplained area phenomena, and extraterrestrials. Dr. Simeon Hein back on Coast to Coast. Simeon, welcome back.
Hey, George. Thanks for having me here tonight.
How have you been?
I've been really good. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Perfect.
You and I think we talked about 2 years ago when you were here in Louisville.
Yes, absolutely. Love that area, by the way. Isn't it something else?
Oh, yeah, really beautiful out here.
Good. I want to get your reaction. You've been following this story of these objects that we've shot down. People are baffled by these things. I mean, hexagonal, octagonal, balloon-like. Well, what do you think's going on?
Well, these sort of phenomena that defy sort of an obvious explanation have been with us for decades, as our listeners know. And it's just not surprising that we've ignored all, entire range of these phenomena. We've done some remote viewing of these objects over the past couple of days, just out of curiosity.
What'd you uncover?
Well, I had one viewer who refers to himself, some listeners might know him as Psychic X. He really wanted to do some viewing. This was a blind target, and I gave him that object that was shot down over Lake Huron. And what he came up with is that this is some sort of transmedium object that could also go underwater as well as be in the air. And he said that there are probably more of them than just the ones that have been seen so far. It's some sort of data gathering device that has a lot of advanced capabilities.
And I have a feeling, Simeon, that's been going on for years, and we probably didn't do anything about it or know about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think Chris Mellon posted an article on his blog yesterday or today where he said that as a result of the TTSA efforts and his work with Luis Elizondo, that the sensors have been recalibrated on these aircrafts, the radar systems and so forth, so that they're picking up more of these objects that have always been out there, but we haven't really been, detecting before.
You wrote a book last year called Dark Matter Monsters, Cryptids, Ball Lightning, and the Science of Secret Life Form. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, George, as you mentioned, I've been teaching remote viewing ever since I learned about it in 1996. And just as Ingo Swann has said, it was really quite a shock to find out that it even worked. I mean, I was open-minded to the idea. I didn't realize that everyone had this ability, let alone myself. Yeah. So realizing that you could describe targets you hadn't seen yet, very accurately draw pictures of them, it just seemed to me that it made sense to teach other people how to do this because it opens up your mind to abilities that you don't even know you have. And in the process of teaching people remote viewing here in Boulder and many other places around the world over the past couple decades, I came across Bigfoot witnesses here and there, and the evidence started to accumulate that there was really something going on that was very important, especially here in Boulder at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. These people who came to my classes, local people, would tell me during lunch, tell our group, during breaks about encounters they had had with Bigfoot for the most part. And I started to see that there were some similarities between this sort of topic and the topic of cryptids and cryptozoology. Some of the phenomena around these creatures, these life forms, whatever they may be, that was very similar to other sorts of paranormal phenomena. And I realized there was sort of an underlying set of scientific principles that really may connect them together.
We have heard three different theories on Bigfoot, Simeon. One is that it's a natural creature, maybe the missing link. Two, that it's dimensional. and 3, that it could be extraterrestrial. What do you think of those?
Right. So my initial understanding of this topic came from Art Bell many years ago.
Right.
When he was talking with Lauren Coleman and other people that knew about this subject. And I was convinced for the longest time that this had to be some sort of relic primate, just some sort of very rare primate that existed mainly in the northwest of the U.S. and other parts of the world. But over the years, I've realized that I don't think that that's actually an accurate description of what's going on. The behavior of this creature has many elements that are very similar to humans. And talking with a Russian researcher about a year or two ago in Bailey, Colorado, at one of the Bigfoot conferences, day-long conferences held by the Sasquatch Outpost, he said that the Russian researchers, and Igor's been studying this topic for 50 years. He's probably the oldest researcher to the Bigfoot topic. In Russia, they call it the Almasty. He said they initially thought it was a relic primate, maybe Gigantopithecus, from many, thousands of years ago that had survived the ice ages and so forth. But after a while, they looked at the behavior, the language, the way they walk bipedally and so forth, swim and all this, and they concluded it might be a relic human, just some sort of very rare relative to us, another type of a Neanderthal or something like this. Mm-hmm. But then he added something really interesting, George, that caught my attention. He said it had paranormal abilities, that they had concluded it was a paranormal human. And when you look at the witness accounts of telepathy, mind speak, Igor gave us accounts that we've heard here in the U.S. of cloaking, invisibility, and many other features that just defy ordinary physical reality. When I looked into this, it seemed to me that what Igor was saying was true. It's a human-type being with paranormal abilities that you and I have to actually take classes in to learn how to do, like remote viewing or psychokinesis, that they just naturally seem to possess.
And these creatures have this ability to disappear at will, don't they?
Absolutely. That's what witnesses that I've talked to describe, and you can read about it yourself. David Paulides has examples of this, too, where they just seem to literally disappear in front of your eyes. In some cases, the witnesses say they only see like parts of the Bigfoot there, or even more strangely, they seem to jump around the area, almost like a cartoon character from here to there, back again, in ways that completely defy our ordinary description of reality. So they really seem to have maybe what Ron Moorhead has described as quantum abilities. He talks about this in his book, The Quantum Bigfoot. Something on that order, really almost another state of matter.
Is it conceivable that the creature may be human but lives in a parallel universe?
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable interpretation of what's going on, because they seem to show up, and then in other cases, you're looking at them, they can disappear, and they don't just disappear like they're gone. There's like a flash of light that Stan Gordon described in his book, Silent Invasion. I mean, I heard him give lectures about this like 20 years ago, about those cases in southwestern Pennsylvania from the 70s. You'll see this luminous phenomena, and that's another thing that really caught my attention. The same phenomena that we've seen around crop circles, the orbs, balls of light, strange luminous phenomena, are also seen around Bigfoot and other cryptids, which is a real indication to me that there's a connection to some underlying scientific phenomena there. You see these glowing orbs around them and strange luminosities that you don't normally see around other sorts of mammals. You certainly don't see this when you go to the zoo. So there's something about them that's really different. And I think the parallel reality idea is certainly a very real possibility.
And where do crop circles fit into this? Are these messages from some other dimension?
Well, for me, crop circles fit into it because, as you know, and as I've described on Coast to Coast over the years when you and I have talked, and I've talked with some of your other hosts,
yeah,
we found a lot of really strange electromagnetic effects around crop circles. And this happened as soon as I went over there with a guy named Ron Russell, who was giving tours, a Denver area artist who was giving tours over there in the 90s. I went over with him in 1997, and even in that summer, I saw camera and battery failure, even to the point where you'd have the solder connections melt in the power supply on a camcorder that was put down in a crop circle. And then other really strange effects, even as you approach the crop circle. So I could see, even in my own equipment, starting in about 1999, that there were electromagnetic effects that really were not explainable in any conventional sense. I mean, as a kid, I used to build electronic kits with my paper route money. So I knew the fundamentals of electronics and radios, but something really strange was going on around crop circles. But the biggest shock to me, George, was to hear witnesses describe the same sorts of things happening around Bigfoot: cameras failing, batteries failing, time loss, a kind of a blurriness around the creature and things like that. I couldn't actually believe that there was a connection between crop circles and Bigfoot and cryptids too. But it seems that there's something going on that's kind of similar between them that makes them create strange effects on our electronic devices.
Why, Simeon, have we not had many crop circle reports lately? I mean, in the past, it seemed like every other week there was a new one across this planet. I haven't heard many now.
Well, to be honest about it, there were people making them in the UK.
Right.
I'm not saying that that was the source of them originally. If you look at some of these books, like I think it's Colin Wilson's book, Terry Wilson, The Secret History of Crop Circles, he describes these going back hundreds of years. But it is true that groups of people made them. And I got to meet these people, and I wrote about it in my book, Opening Minds, meeting these circle makers, initially thinking they were hoaxers, and then realizing that they understood that once you created these shapes, there was a really special type of energy there that they could see affected their electronics, cameras, our equipment, and so forth. And they began to make more and more of these. But I think another way to look at it is these sorts of information and energy can take different forms from decade to decade, and it can switch from UFO phenomena to crop circles. I have met witnesses who have seen meadows and meadow plants flattened by flying discs, UFOs, and so forth. So it's actually a rather complex phenomena. I don't think it has just one source. And I wrote about that in Black Swan Ghosts. I mean, people have seen orbs and balls of light around crop circles. They've seen UFOs. But the interesting thing, George, even the human circle makers described to me seeing the same phenomena when they were out in the field.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, when they were about to make these circles, orbs showed up and chased them out of the fields. I know this happened in 1998 in an area called Tosmead Copse by Alton Barnes in Wiltshire. And other circle makers described seeing small triangular craft come over the circles as they were making them at night, as if they were inspecting them. So it's quite a complex phenomena. And there certainly was a time when there were more of them. There seem to be less now. But that doesn't mean that, the whole energy is gone. It's probably just transformed itself into other types of phenomena.
Are the orbs and ball lightning one and the same, Simeon?
Yeah, I think they are, George. That's the argument I make in Dark Matter Monsters is Earth lights, Hessdalen lights, orbs, ball lightning, as other researchers argue too. I'm not the first to argue that. People have looked at this very seriously, and as you know, ball lightning goes back hundreds of years. Many people have researched this, written books. It's all really the same type of matter. We could call it coherent matter. It's a fifth state of matter beyond plasmas and the ordinary states of matter that we're used to. It's a type of compressed matter. And the real interesting thing is, why would you see it around Bigfoot and crop circles and UFOs and even haunted locations?
And there's no question there seems to be some intelligence behind these orbs, don't you think?
Yeah, that is the really interesting thing about it. And George, even ball lightning researchers are really puzzled by this. it's not something I can completely explain. Even the most physical scientific explanation of ball lightning as a type of compressed matter that has formed a type of coherency, kind of like the Bose-Einstein condensate that, was postulated by Einstein and Bose in 1925 and then discovered finally actually here in Boulder in 1995. Those states of matter have a purely physics description. You can describe them that way. But when you look at the behavior of ball lightning, it can actually seem like it's intelligent. It can follow people around, animals. And there is a real fine gray zone between orbs, ball lightning, and even UFOs. Even the ball lightning researchers say that they can't distinguish completely between UFOs and orbs. So there's a real continuum here, and it's really interesting how some of it seems to pick up, some sort of intelligence, intention. A very interesting subject.
Under whose control, Simeon, might they be?
That is something I wonder about all the time, because if you look at Skinwalker Ranch, which George Knapp and Com Keller
they're the best for that.
Exactly, and they wrote the book The Hunt for the Skinwalker, and then more recently we had Skinwalkers at the Pentagon by James T. Lukatsky and Keller and Knapp. They go into all these cases around Skinwalker Ranch, and it's not just Skinwalker Ranch, as you in the audience know. It's other locations throughout the United States. Marley Woods in Missouri, Ted Phillips studied that, J. Allen Hynek's assistant, who looked at all those trace cases, and Elbert County in Colorado and parts of Washington State, Yakima area. You get these phenomena, and the orbs, I think a lot of it actually is ball lightning, but you really have to wonder whether someone is directing it in some way. Because, the CIA's own study of orbs, as John Ramirez has talked about on many podcasts recently, the former missile signals intelligence analyst, he said that there was an orb study program classified within the CIA and a UFO program, and the CIA concluded that UFOs can have an orb-like form where they don't look solid anymore. They look more like a plasma.
Mm-hmm.
So there seems to be a continuum of matter and orbs where they sort of switch forms. And that's why it seems like another state of matter that could have a consciousness, intelligence sort of injected into it. And yet at other times it just seems like typical ball lightning bouncing along on a road or moving down the aisle of an airplane. So it's a really interesting question, and I don't have the final answer to it.
And the orbs are about the size of a basketball, you think?
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing, George. Ball lightning typically could be a few inches apart. I've seen it twice in the UK in and around the crop circles. The one I saw once with another fellow that was there in '98 looked like a small blue grapefruit, and another time I saw one underneath a cloud that was considerably bigger. But it has varying sizes. But the really interesting thing when you look at this is that there's a micro ball lightning type 2 that is really small, and it can bury itself in metals. It can even have a stealth mode, a dark mode where you won't see it anymore. It actually resembles a black hole. And a lot of researchers think that is actually the basis of what we call cold fusion, low energy nuclear reaction.
We're going to come back and take more information with Simeon Hein. In the next hour, we'll take your calls. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with Dr. Simeon Hein. His websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Simeon, I've always been fascinated by orbs, trying to figure out where they come from. Might they be from little UFOs, ETs, craft, or some other place?
Well, there's no doubt about it. If you look at the literature, even going back to that NICAP study from the 60s by Kehoe and Lohr called Strange Effects Around UFOs, you often get orbs and balls of light coming off of UFOs, being in the same vicinity, and so forth. But they originate from many different sources. I mean, people have seen them around earthquakes. They can be called earthquake lights. And that seems to be due to the compression of tectonic plates really pushing together. And when you get any sort of particles pressing together in a sustained way, it can create orbs, ball lightning. You create these mini orbs, George, every time you generate static buildup. If you walk across a carpet and touch your doorknob, or even on sheets in your bed, you can see that at night. They're there temporarily, but they don't sustain themselves. But when we see them as something that lasts for a few seconds or a few minutes or even longer, that's because they've kind of created this kind of self-catalyzing chain reaction, and it's become a coherent ball of matter where all the particles are at the same frequency, and they can sustain themselves in that form for quite a while. And when they do that, they glow, they give off different types of light. But the really interesting thing about it is they can create these gravitational effects. Ted Phillips at Marley Ranch, at one of his lectures from, I think it's the Ozark UFO conference, in 2009, described a picnic bench lifting off the ground as an orb went over it. Jeez. Like it was pulling at the chains that it was connected to that held it on the ground. And this is what people have described around these orbs. These strange gravitational effects, or some researchers call it like a gravitational collapse. There's a lot of really strange effects around them, including space-time distortions, and that's when it really begins to blend into all these other paranormal phenomena that we're all familiar with.
During World War II, pilots saw what they call Foo Fighters,
right,
which look like orbs.
Yeah. Those very well could have been ball lightning. I mean, I wasn't there at the time, and I'm open to either explanation, that they're an orb type of UFO that were checking out our aircraft. I mean, I've spoken to people that worked in classified aerospace facilities that said that they saw those balls of light come right through the walls and seem like they were inspecting some of the aircraft that they were assembling at some of these classified facilities around Palmdale. And maybe that's what the World War II pilots were seeing. The other possibility is that those were naturally formed orbs that just seemed to be attracted to technological objects, static electricity, and so forth. It could be one of those explanations. But now that I've learned more about orbs and ball lightning, you have to consider that as also another possibility, in addition to the idea that they're orb-type, orb-looking UFOs.
What happened to that Midwestern town that had some kind of electromagnetic collapse to it?
Well, that is a really interesting story, and someone who had worked in the Pentagon told me that story at a remote viewing conference where I got to meet him and his wife. And what he said was, when he was working at the Pentagon, they picked up in the 1960s that a town in the Midwest had completely had a collapsed electromagnetic field. Nothing electrical worked, including batteries, wristwatches. It seems almost like paranormal, right? I mean, nothing electrical worked, and the people in that town must have really wondered what was going on. It wasn't just the electrical lines. And he told me over at the Pentagon, they really had no idea what was happening there. What could have caused something like that to happen? We can only speculate. Was it a UFO hovering over the town? Was it a small black hole that may have entered our atmosphere that Russian researchers, Alexander Parkhomov and others, have speculated have happened? They've seen examples of this in Russia over the decades, where gravity collapsed in certain towns for a few minutes.
If it were an X-flare from the sun, it would have been a wider area, I bet, right?
Yeah, you would think so, wouldn't you?
Not just a town.
What it showed me, George, is that our government monitors every square inch of the U.S., and I think that's why he was very reluctant to have me publicize that story. I did get his permission to talk about this openly, but you'll notice you never heard about this in the news anywhere. It was never discussed. The people outside that town never knew what was happening to them, and it shows us that, literally, if you wonder how these UAPs are detected now that are coming over Alaska or Lake Huron, even small ones, I mean, it showed me that this sort of MASINT, I think, as it's called, measures and signatures intelligence. The intelligence and defense establishments literally monitor every square mile of the physical U.S. and they can. He never told me how they picked this up, how they detected this. He wouldn't tell me that. We can only speculate, but they can see when these sorts of things happen.
PK, which is psychokinesis. Tell us a little bit about a Soviet experiment that we monitored.
Well, now, psychokinesis is something that I'm sure many of our listeners are familiar with. We've all heard about and know about Uri Geller.
Yeah, he's been on the program many times, by the way.
Right. And early on at SRI, as many people know, even before Ingo Swann and Pat Price, they were testing Uri Geller there.
That's right.
And he was able to demonstrate these PK abilities. Russell Targ told me he saw Uri do this once when there was no way Uri could have affected that object in another room physically, but it moved when Uri wanted it to move. So we heard about it from Uri, but what I found out about from this same individual who worked in the Pentagon, and this was another astounding story, is in 1976, one of the U.S. intelligence agencies was monitoring a Soviet PK experiment where the PK sender was 1,000 miles away from Moscow, and he was intending to bend a spoon. And there were 30 people in the U.S. monitoring that Soviet PK experiment. And I asked this individual, I said, did the spoon bend? He said, yes, on command. From 1,000 miles away, that spoon bent. Jeez. They could hear it was a successful experiment. And again, another astounding thing about it is this never made the news. We never heard about this. And I guess if I hadn't persisted in sharing it with all of you, we never would have heard this story outside of that group of intelligence operatives, officials who were monitoring the experiment. But I mean, what that means is the U.S. government had proof positive that PK is real. If you aren't already convinced that they knew about it, but they felt it was more important to keep it secret. They didn't even tell the remote viewing program at Fort Meade about this, even though those remote viewers seem to have known about their Soviet counterparts. So it's just another fascinating story of the paranormal during the Cold War.
Jeffrey Mishlove wrote a book called The PK Man about mind over matter, and apparently it's a big thing, isn't it?
It is a big thing, and I saw a demonstration of this twice near Nagasaki in Japan when I was teaching remote viewing over there a number of years ago. And this individual did not want any publicity. I had to agree not to reveal the location or his name, but he was very good at this. He could levitate objects over his palm. He could take Coke bottles and turn them into like a liquid temporarily and twist them around, in addition to ordinary objects like spoons. And the most amazing thing he did is I was about 15 feet away from him. He gave these demonstrations at his lunch place. His wife would make lunch, and then you'd see this show, so to speak. He actually projected a cigarette that was levitating over his hand into my shirt pocket from 15 feet away.
Jeez.
First try. It went in. George, it came across the room like a torpedo and made a right angle over my shirt pocket and went right in the shirt pocket. And you and I could try to do that all day, and we wouldn't be able to do it. He did it the first time, and then he ran at the end. Someone I knew there who was in the remote viewing class, a surgeon, said, "Would you like to meet him?" So I went back, and he ran his hand over my arm from a distance of a couple inches away. And it felt like pins and needles, like an electrical shock right in my arm, just like Nikola Tesla described being around some of his devices. So it's definitely real. I've seen it. It's the real deal. It's the real thing.
In your title, Dark Matter Monsters, Cryptids, Ball Lightning, and the Science of Secret Life Form, what is the secret life form part?
The real interesting aspect about cryptids and Bigfoot, and whether cryptids a type of cryptid or not, is a subject to debate. But the interesting thing is dark matter, we know, makes up the vast majority of matter in the universe. It's 90% of physical matter. And we also have something called dark energy. And our type of matter that you and I are familiar with is only about 0.5% of all the matter just in our universe alone. And to think that there are life forms that are built around dark matter that could be invisible if they wanted to be invisible. We wouldn't see them because they're based more on dark matter than ordinary matter. It's just a very interesting prospect. I mean, you mentioned the idea in the previous segment about Bigfoot's ability to move into parallel realities, which I believe. But even in our own reality, they can apparently cloak themselves or appear as a tree stump or a boulder. People have seen them do this, turn into a bush, something that's reasonably convincing as a bush. It's like they've harnessed another state of matter. And all of the research into dark matter shows us, and this was really astounding to learn this, it's not just something way out there in the cosmos. It streams and fluxes into the Earth. At least one form we call relic neutrinos from the cosmic background radiation. It could be most cosmologists agree that's about 1% of dark matter. We don't know what the rest of it is. But even 1% is more than all the matter we know about. And so this dark matter is flowing and fluxing gravitationally around objects like planets and stars and so forth. And it shows up here on Earth, and the evidence shows that it interacts with us biologically, chemically, and affects all sorts of even radioactive nuclear processes. So it just seems reasonable that there are life forms that are also based on dark matter, too. And just like dark matter is invisible, it seems that these types of life forms would also be able to be invisible when they wanted to be.
Simeon, do you believe we are being visited by beings from another planetary system?
I think the evidence suggests that that's true. Based on all of the evidence I've been able to assemble since I've been studying this pretty intensively in the last 25 years based on my own experiences. But the thing about it, George, that we need to remember is it's not going to show up the way your mind expects it to. Right. Just like in a remote viewing session, the data doesn't show up in a way that you expected it to. It's sort of surprising. That's how you kind of know it's accurate. It sort of surprises you. These types of intelligence could be showing up all around us, but we have such strong mental defense mechanisms not to perceive things that don't fit our ordinary sense of reality that you might experience it, and this is true of cryptids too and Bigfoot, and you might forget about it. It might just create a sense of time loss because your brain says, like, does not compute, if that makes sense. So we might be having those experiences, and maybe some people remember it, or some of us have those experiences and you don't remember it. And I'm sure that's true with Bigfoot. There's a very good recent documentary called "A Flash of Beauty: Bigfoot Revealed," and in the final section of the documentary, they have psychiatrists and psychologists saying, not only will you have kind of maybe a PTSD response to encountering a huge Bigfoot out there, you might not even remember any of it. And I'm sure that's happening with extraterrestrial visitation, too. It's just too outside the bounds of your ordinary conscious mind's idea of what's real.
If you could get an answer to one question, what would that question be?
The real question, I think, would be is how many types of parallel realities are we all interacting with on a regular basis beyond the ordinary one that we're used to? And then what's the structure of it? And how do life forms move between these parallel realities when, for the most part, you and I seem to be sort of in sort of our ordinary reality most of the time? So how is it that they're able to achieve that kind of fluidity and change forms and so forth? I think that would be the question.
Where do we get your books, Simeon?
Sure. You can get them on my website. I have a special offer for Coast listeners at newcrystalmind.com to get signed copies. I'm happy to send people signed copies of any of these books, Opening Minds or Dark Matter Monsters. And, of course, they're available on Amazon in softcover Kindle. And Dark Matter Monsters actually is also available in hardcover, too. So there'll be an audiobook down the road, too.
But the best deal is at newcrystalmind.com?
Yeah, because I can send it to them directly. I can sign them. It's always fun to sign them for listeners. And, Coast has such a great bunch of listeners. I just love interacting with them, sending them books and so forth.
Well, you're going to interact in just a moment as we take calls next hour here on Coast to Coast. Dr. Simeon Hein with us. His latest book is called Dark matter, monsters, cryptids, ball lightning, and the science of secret life form. You've heard what we've been talking about? Jump aboard. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with you with Dr. Simeon Hein. His websites are all linked up at coasttocoastam.com. He's got a number of books out there, including his latest, Dark Matter Monsters. Another one he wrote is Black Swan Ghosts, then Planetary Intelligence, Opening Minds as well. How did you get interested in all this, Simeon? Was it the remote viewing episode that did it for you?
Yeah, that certainly pushed things in that direction. But honestly, when I was 11 or 12, my mom, who was a bird watcher, took us to the Everglades in the early 70s. And I saw something overhead while we were out there in the swamps, and I thought it was the moon until we both looked at it with our binoculars. And it was a structured object that was bright and as large as the moon. And well, we went to a ranger talk right after that, and my mom, said, "Hey, the ranger said, 'Hey, did anyone see anything interesting today?' Right?" And my mom raised her hand, said, "We saw it. You saw a UFO." And the ranger said, "That's interesting. Did anyone else see anything else today?" Totally dodged the topic. So I think it started with that sighting of whatever that object was. It was sort of amorphous, but it had structure in it, solid dots. And I think that got my curiosity going.
Did you ever think you'd be investigating all of this by now?
No, I never did, because I went to school, college, then graduate school, and no one ever mentioned any of these topics. I never heard the word UFO mentioned once in college or graduate school, any of these subjects. I think it was the real shock of seeing how well remote viewing worked and wondering, it had been part of a classified government program. And then you start wondering, well, if they didn't tell us about remote viewing, what else haven't they told us about? That's also equally real. And you just start digging, and you come across all these topics with lots of evidence.
What's the story of a top-level engineer who touched some extraterrestrial spacecraft material?
Right. So I've encountered two engineers that have told me they've handled materials. One of them was a guy named Phil from this area who was okay with me using his name, and I wrote about that in Black Swan Ghost. And he worked at JPL, and he said that one day the managers came into his group and said, "We have this material, but the people left. We can't figure out how it works." And he said, Phil told me they all looked at this material and said, "This is not made here. It's just way too sophisticated." And I said, "So, Phil, you thought it was extraterrestrial?" And he said, "No, I know it was. It wasn't made of any materials that we have here."
That's fascinating. Do you think Roswell happened, Simeon? Are you there? I think we lost him, Tom.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're there.
Yeah. One of the witnesses I talked to, who I included in Black Swan Ghosts, she told me, and I just happened to meet her in a deli in Boulder. She said that her dad had flown wreckage from Roswell back to Wright-Patterson in 1947 on that second flight. I think it was called Straight Flush.
The second one, yeah.
And, yeah. And she said he only told this to his family right on his deathbed, right before he passed away, to each of his four daughters separately in his hospital room. He said he was scared that if he had talked about it before, that there would be repercussions. And he said the crates were guarded from him and the other pilot by armed guards. So you would have to imagine that material was pretty important to guard it from your own pilots.
Fascinating. Let's go to the phones west of the Rockies. Marcia's with us in Los Gatos, California. Welcome to the show. Hey, Marcia.
Hey, George. Nice to talk with you. Another year's gone by, and all the hearts are still beating. And I wanted to say Merry Happy Valentine's Day night or morning after to Dr. Simeon. And I wanted to say that Dr. Simeon has really mentioned just a zillion things that we all love. And I've been exposed to these things, most all of it. And I want to tell a Bigfoot story tonight. How's that, George?
Go for it.
Well, we have Bigfoot in my woods, and I've interacted with them several times and seen witness to a hair left on my windshield wiper, my 4x on the back. pebbles that have been thrown onto the deck, couldn't have slid off a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Also, one night after Coast, show was over. It's about, I haven't slept yet. It's like about 3 in the morning, and a tree went down. So I got out and I took a walkabout. And, you just want to hope you got a road that's still open. So I, was smelling, like sniffing, because there was enough light by the moon to see the leftover stuff still in the sky. When a tree comes down, it hits lots of other bushes and trees. And I was just enjoying the smell. And as I walked past Bigfoot Hill, I sniffed, and then I kept walking, I sniffed. Then I turned around and came back, tracing my same footsteps. And on the third time past this big bush, I got someone mimicking me, and it was a Bigfoot going, and like, I've had enough of you ladies.
Well, that's pretty good, by the way.
Excuse me, George?
That was pretty good.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I love you guys, and I just wanted to call out the staff who's been with you for so long. And, they have put together so much for us, and we don't really get to hear too much about them. We don't know if they're in their closets or not, But thank you, George, for allowing me to tell my Bigfoot story.
Thank you.
And thanks for all the subject matter, Simeon.
Simeon, what do you think of that story?
Yeah, it's so typical of Bigfoot behavior. What the caller just said, you get the stone throwing, right? Trees getting pushed down, sound. Sometimes I just read a story yesterday of the witness describing the Bigfoot was mimicking them eating. It was from one of Dave Paulides' books, Tribal Bigfoot. And so the amazing thing is how consistent it is for witnesses. The behavior is so similar. That's how you know that they're telling you a real story.
Frank is with us in Hollywood, Maryland. Frank, go ahead.
Howdy, George. Glad to be back with you.
You too.
During the course of the show, I'd like for you to relay that incident with the Bigfoot and the 3 fishes, which you refer to quite often on the show. Refer that to Dr. Simeon during the course of the show. Now, I got a comment to make about Bigfoot. Do you remember? Because people in your profession, baseball players and elephants, had the best memories. Do you remember the time 6-8 years ago when a group of Green Berets were on a training mission, but it was masked as looking for evidence of Bigfoot? Now, my take on Bigfoot, I have a patently preposterous proposal to make about the origin of Bigfoot. I stated this 6-8 years ago, that they came here from another planet. They were workers, pets and workers. I won't use the word slaves, but there was a problem with them and the extraterrestrials that brought them here. They didn't like the workload. They didn't like the menu. They got tired of that, so the extraterrestrials said they wouldn't have any of it. So they were left here. They were banished here on this planet.
What do you think of that, Simeon?
Right. I don't think any of us really know where they actually come from. I just, you look at them morphologically, they seem very similar to humans, primates to some degree. There is this idea that they come from other planets. I don't have the evidence that that's necessarily true, but we really can't discount anything. We really don't know very much about them.
The call that he was referencing, we got several years ago during one of my open lines, where a fellow said he was fishing by the side of a small pond and caught 2 fish. And then he looked over, he saw Bigfoot about 10 feet away from him, staring at the fish. And he went, oh, my God, what am I going to do? So he handed Bigfoot the 2 fish. The creature took the fish, looked at the guy, and gave him 1 back.
Right.
So that tells me, if it's a true story, they've got some kind of intelligence behind them. They've got a conscience.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. No, I've read stories just like that, where people give them the fish. Sometimes they take the fish while you're not looking, but
yeah,
they have this sense of fairness, which is very human-like, isn't it? Where they kind of have this sense of what's fair. You get half, I get half. And then people set up these gifting relationships. I'm sure you've heard about this, where they leave apples out for them, and the Bigfoot will leave them rocks and crystals, things like that.
Have you ever heard a story of Bigfoot hurting a human?
I have unfortunately heard stories like this, and at least frightening them a lot. And I've read stories about this. Now, of course, I can't totally ascertain, since I wasn't there, whether these are real stories. They seem real to me. And they certainly scared a lot of national park rangers. If you look at some of Rusty Wilson's book, The Fly Fisher Guide, who does fly fishing trips in Colorado, Montana, he's talked to a lot of people who've worked in national parks and national park rangers, and they've described being chased out of backcountry areas and so forth. Yep.
Let's go to Don in Alberta, Canada, international line. Don, my daughter's out that way. She said there's a lot of snow on the ground.
Yeah, there's always a lot of snow here, George. Anyway,
go ahead.
I'll try to be three fast. Thanks for having me on. Moving objects, I worked on it for 7 years. I didn't really have a guide. I just had read Lobsang Rampa, and then there's another guy, Paul Twitchell. I read some of their books, and they talked about creating an energy. And what I found was, and this was the key, I wish I would have had the information, is you need the emotional spark, and then the brain decides what you're going to do, and then it comes through the heart. But by the time I finally figured it out, it was like having a poltergeist in the room. Everything was flying everywhere. Or it was like you could literally throw a car off the road. So I kind of left that behind because I was worried about the karmic aspect of it. But moving on to, in Jasper, I think it was this last year, there was a guy.
Oh, we lost him.
Got it, and the guy got disappeared. So I don't know what happened. Can you still...
Did you pick some of that up?
Yeah, I did. I mean, this is an open question, George, whether some of these disappearances in parks are related to Bigfoot and cryptids. And certainly some of these other cryptids don't seem always so friendly. So it's definitely something that we should be looking into. I don't know if the evidence is there yet, but it certainly seems like a possibility.
All right, Don, thanks for the call. Next up, let's go to Joe, Monterey, California. Hello, Joseph. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for taking my call, George.
Thank you.
I have two things to talk about. Number one, Bigfoot is indigenous to this planet. And I could tell you why I say this, but let's talk about the orb for 1 minute. Going to a vortex with some friends, I went there particularly to take photos of my guide and some higher beings that I work with. And they took those photos. They were right next to me. And they were huge, like 5 foot orb, like egg-like. And one that was in front was a streak of white light with a smaller bright light. They were almost, you could almost see through them. That's how bright they were. They were really very, looked physical almost, but you knew they were orbs. That was one time. I know who they were, by the way. They were right next to me, so there was no mistake. And I went there particularly for that photo. Now, as far as Bigfoot is concerned, I work at expos, and I was passing a certain row of booths, and there were some channelers they channel. And sometimes I go by, and I always get messages. And one time I went by, and there was someone said, "I have a message for you." I'm used to this, by the way. This is what I do. And she said, "It's you in a past life." Now, I know some of my past lives, and I know I was from other planets. So he said, "Please forgive me for the genetic experiments and stuff about creating the human race." They did interfere with us. They didn't intervene. They interfered with us. Why would they have Bigfoot as a remnant from our indigenous, our first humans. Because when you're doing a genetic experiments of any kind, you need a control group. You need a gene pool, and you cannot destroy the gene pool. Bigfoot is the gene pool of this planet. A number of races have been playing with genetics and experimenting with the human race. They dumbed us down. That was his message. He wanted me to forgive him. That was me in a past life, way back. So that's my contribution for your search, by the way. You might want to consider that the genetic differences, the changes in genetics across the board from all the races on the planet, and see if it comes back to a commonality. But that's like the missing link that you're looking for. Thank you, George, for taking my call.
All right, Joe. What do you think of that, Simeon?
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. I think it makes sense what the caller's saying, is that we're actually the hybrid from Bigfoot. I could totally accept that. And that the reason they have these abilities is that it's just the natural course of nature to be able to change forms and to change frequencies. And for some reason, and perhaps it's what the caller is saying, that we were modified from what the Bigfoot used to be, whatever that creature was, whatever that hominid was, and somehow the abilities were taken away. But the Bigfoot still naturally have that natural telepathy and ability to change forms and shapes. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Could Bigfoot be the missing link between ape and man?
Yes, I think it's a big possibility. We haven't had scientists, and I know some of these people, some of them are relatives of my own family. We haven't had a lot of, anthropologists and, animal specialists, primatologists. We haven't had them really look at this because it's such a controversial subject, right? But it's certainly part of the puzzle, is how we're related to Bigfoot, and are they, as the caller suggesting, a natural evolutionary product of life on the planet that someone else came along, perhaps extraterrestrials, and genetically modified? And you have to think about the other cryptids too. Why do you have these other creatures? Dogman, right? That seems like, wolf human.
Yeah.
Frogman, I've read about, seems like frog human. Is that some sort of genetic modification? Is it natural? I don't know, but we good questions. We've got good questions.
How about these red-eyed dogs that people see?
Yeah, that is a really interesting aspect to it. I've talked to witnesses who've said that the Bigfoot they've seen, actually their eyes cast light. They glowed, and not from reflecting the moon or something. They literally gave off light. You hear this about the dogman, and as they're called, werewolves, dogman, and Bigfoot, that their eyes glow red. In the witness I talked to, Barbara, she said, and this was from the 1970s on an archaeological dig on the China Lake naval base area where they had permission from the Smithsonian to be out there. She said the Bigfoot that they saw right outside their tent, about 9 or 10 feet, had yellow glowing eyes.
Wow. We're going to come back, Simeon, and take final calls in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. We'll be back with Dr. Simeon Hein and take final calls in just a moment on Coast to Coast. On our next Coast to Coast program, a former FDA investigator tells us be careful what you eat. Make sure you're part of that program. And then later on, Rebecca Pittman joins us to talk about the Salem witch hunting trials right here on Coast to Coast. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, along with Dr. Simeon Hein, and your final questions here. Simeon, what baffles you the most about the unusual that we've been talking about?
Really what's most baffling is, why do we humans have such a resistance to talk about these subjects, except on late-night radio like this?
Exactly.
Why isn't this part of the public discussion? And it's not just UFOs. Just listen to the calls coming in tonight. Where are people who experience Bigfoot or other phenomena like this? Where do they go to talk about this apart from this show? There's not a lot of places.
There's not a lot of places. That's right.
It's baffling to me as a sociologist and just as a person of why society is so resistant to talk about these subjects. That's the baffling thing.
Do you think if science jumped on this, that they'd get some answers?
Well, they are jumping on it, I think. I think you can see it. They've renamed UFOs as UAP, and all of a sudden it's acceptable to talk about it. You just look at the news headlines over the past couple of days.
Oh, my God,
I've had mathematicians come up to me just in coffee shops here just today in Boulder saying, Simeon, what is going on? Tell me, what are we seeing in those skies? So I think it will change. George, 200 years ago, scientists didn't even believe in meteorites. It was considered to be a volcano stone or something that lightning had. Everything has been controversial that we believe in as ordinary reality. It was all controversial at one point. And things every century or so, things change. I think we're seeing that again now.
To the phones we go. Next up, let's go to Pablo in Chicago, east of the Rockies. Hey, Pablo, go ahead.
I'd like to ask Dr. Simeon a question, but I have a comment. What you mentioned earlier about whether or not the Sasquatch or whatever they are were hostile or friendly. But
right.
I did hear a report about the way that they're not really that amicable, about a story about some campers in the Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union that were attacked by these monsters or big feet. And all of the campers were killed, and one of the campers, which was a woman, had her tongue ripped out of her mouth.
Oh, geez.
So they're not always amicable. But I appreciate Dr. Simeon, the way he articulates everything so clearly. That I appreciate that. And I'm one of your blind veteran listeners, like your regular caller. I call him this centurion. But my question is this. Years ago, I was listening to a program about an Indian, I guess you call him a guru, where they take this rope and they throw the rope up in the air and it stands on end, and then a little boy climbs up the rope and then disappears.
Jeez.
And they tell me they have pictures of it. And I wondered if Dr. Simeon knows anything about that, or is there any explanation, or is it just an optical illusion?
All right. Thank you, Pablo. I've never heard of that one, Simeon.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for calling in. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I've never heard about it before just now. So I can't really say, George, I like to base my ideas on some sort of evidence that I've been able to look at, And I've never heard about that before, but thanks for telling us about it. I'll actually look into it. I will say I am surprised how many things that I didn't believe in that I now think are real upon looking at the evidence.
Or at least possible.
At least possible, yep.
Carl in the Bronx in New York. Hello, Carl. Take it away.
George. Hi, Dr. Simeon. Similar to what this last caller asked about, there was a Sai Baba in India years ago that he was always being mentioned on Coast to Coast of his abilities to defy gravity. There was a number of reports. He has passed away, but he was able to pull objects from nowhere just by his abilities. Have you ever looked into the Sai Baba of India in the past?
I don't know that much about Sai Baba in particular, but what you're talking about is the phenomena that's called aports. And we were mentioning Uri Geller before. While Uri was at SRI working with Russell Targenhal, Putoff, and others, they saw these aports show up. Objects that I forget who it was, whether it was Russell or Hal, that they had been missing for months would just fall at their feet out of the air. In one case, one of them, I think it was a lapel pin, showed up in ice cream that they had just bought at the beach. And it had been missing for 6 months, if I remember correctly. So the aports are a very interesting aspect of all this, and I have to say it happens around Bigfoot too. People see objects that they can't imagine where they came from just show up. So it is, again, something that I would have been very skeptical of maybe 10 or 20 years ago, but I've heard a lot of credible reports of it, and I think that's what you're referring to.
And Sai Baba died in 1918, and he was considered to be a saint. Incredible powers that they thought he had. Billy in Dallas, Texas. Hey, Billy, you're on the air with us. Go ahead.
Thank you, George. I just wanted to mention when I was about 8 or 9 years old, my great aunt used to take care of me when my parents were at work. And one day she was sitting there and she told me she lived in the home that her father had built, and they had been there since about the 20s. But she told me about an orb that appeared and showed me right in the kitchen where it appeared. And she said that same thing, that it looked like it was looking for something. It just went on down the cabinets, and then it went into their sink, and she said then it disappeared. So ever since that time, and I've never forgot that story. She told it to me, and like I said, after listening course to coast, I finally figured out what it was.
Simeon, do the orbs travel at the speed of light?
They normally seem to be within our gravitational frame of reference. They seem to move at the speeds we're used to. If they move faster like that, we probably wouldn't see them. But it's an interesting question, George, because one of the researchers into this whole subject matter who did fantastic research, Ken Shoulders, who was a colleague of Hal Puthoff's for a while, he described ball lightning orbs as having their own permittivity, which is an object's ability to resist electrical fields. And he said these orbs, the permittivity went down, down, down to make them like superconductors, and it would also increase their speed of light, which is why cold fusion LENR researchers often say that those glowing orbs they see around those experiments are almost impossible to photograph. They're really blurry because they're not in our frame of reference anymore. So it's a really interesting question.
First-time caller Mary Jane in Festus, Missouri. Hello, Mary Jane.
Hi, George, doctor. I have a little incident I've been wanting to tell you, George, for a long time.
Okay.
Around November 2019, I was sitting here in bed, propped up, drinking a cup of coffee, no lights, and all of a sudden, 3 orbs went by my big window here in my bedroom. I jumped up and pulled the curtains back. 2 of them went over into the trees. One of them came right up to the window where I was standing, and it stayed with its regular light on, and then it was like it noticed me, and it dimmed, and then it all of a sudden went off like you turned off a light switch.
That's a great story. Simeon, are there any objects of these orbs, are there any occupants, like small little ETs or anything like that, floating around inside of them?
Yeah, no, that's interesting you asked that, because I did have some witnesses who saw something like that at Silbury Hill in Wiltshire that I put in Black Swan Ghosts, Paul and Sonia. And they said they saw these 3 orbs. It's interesting, the caller here is talking about 3. They saw them floating down the wheat field on the other side of the A4 towards Silbury Hill. They were at the top of the hill at the time, camping up there. And Paul described to me seeing little beings sitting in each one of them. That's what he described. And so, yes, people see this sometimes, George. That's one case of it.
I've always wondered if they were under some kind of control like that.
Well, just like the last caller, it seems like it's under control, and some of these really do seem like they are under control. And yet even the ones that would just seem like a purely physical phenomena are very sensitive to static gradients, which means they're going to move very carefully around you and your house and go through certain parts of the window. So again, it's a really fine line between the ones that seem just purely like compressed matter and the ones that seem like they're under intelligent control, because some of them really do seem like that.
Let's go to Raleigh, North Carolina. Mark's with us this time. Mark, go ahead, sir.
Hi, good morning. In 1978, I was 12 years old and in the 6th grade, and our teacher asked for 2 volunteers to go and unload a NASA JPL truck that was carrying some roving exhibit to our school. And so I volunteered and went out and helped the truck driver unload some crates and things and bring them into the school. And I headed back to the truck. The driver and the other kid were still inside. And, I just assumed there were a lot of items on this truck, and I just assumed the next item was this big, heavy metal pipe, this thick pipe. And it had a hang tag, as I recall, at one end. And so I braced myself, got down, using my legs to pick it up and everything. And I nearly broke my nose. This thing was light as a feather. It had great mass, but no weight. And I could bounce it in my hands. And to this day, even now in 2023, I've never seen a metal or even carbon fiber that, of that thickness that would have that equivalent. And so the driver came around and got really annoyed that I was handling this and told me to put it down immediately. And I asked him, I said, "Sir," I said, "what is that?" And he said, never mind, get off the truck.
Wow.
And he said, you boys are finished, go back to the classroom. And so, ever since then, I've always wondered what that was.
Tried to get away from you real quickly, didn't he? Interesting, Simeon.
Yeah, it's like one of those mystery metals, right, from Roswell and other crash retrieval sites that we've heard about, where the metal seems to weigh almost nothing, but it's really strong.
You can unfold it and things like that.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
Strange. Let's take another call. Let's go next to Julie in Alabama. Welcome to the program. Hi, Julie. Go ahead.
Hi, George. Hi, Sim. Happy Valentine's Day, sweet.
Hey, Jules.
I have a bizarre thought that came to me. The relic neutrinos and the EVOs, you said in the book, you say that they have a chain reaction. Could that possibly have something to do with the hitchhiker effect, with the dark matter phenomenon, and how once you have one of these experiences, like when I saw my Bigfoot when I was a child, it sort of sparked the poltergeist phenomenon, the psychic phenomenon, the UFO experiences. Could it have been like a catalyst for a chain reaction, like in the Leonard experiments?
Interesting.
Now, that's a really good question. Thanks for asking that. Right. What the caller is referring to is that this dark matter relic neutrino mass seems to keep condensing, and it eventually catalyzes into another type of matter, which many researchers believe is the basis of what we called cold fusion, the Fleischmann-Pons experiments from Salt Lake City in '89, but now it's called Leonard low-energy nuclear reaction. And that's what becomes the ball lightning after a while, is the compression keeps catalyzing. It's a self-reinforcing reaction, eventually turning into a ball of light. Now, the hitchhiker effect is what Lakatsky talked about. It's Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. The idea that these phenomena can show up when you go home, away from these portal areas like Skinwalker Ranch or Marley Woods. So it's a really good question of whether some of that dark matter has sort of attached itself to you, catalyzed itself to your matter, and maybe that's certainly one possibility. Or maybe it's changed you in ways that you're perceiving more frequencies than you did before.
Simeon, my friend, thank you so much for being part of the program. Keep in touch with us. For Adam Thompson, Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Ryan Stacy, Tim Banal, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.